Weddings are supposed to be joyful occasions, full of love, laughter, and celebration. But for me, my sister's wedding was anything but. It was a day I'd been dreading from the moment she asked me to be her maid of honor. A role I had once dreamed about, but that ultimately became a nightmare. And it all culminated in the most humiliating moment of my life. Being made to sit at the kids' table, as if I didn't belong with the adults, as if I wasn't even worthy of my role. Let me start from the beginning, because that day didn't come out of nowhere. The truth is, my relationship with my sister, Lily, had always been complicated. She's 2 years older than me. And growing up, I idolized her. She was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. While I always felt like I was stumbling behind her, never quite measuring up, our parents adored her. Straight A student, popular, captain of the cheerleading squad. She was the kind of person who made everything look effortless, while I struggled just to keep up. As kids, we were close, or at least I thought we were. I followed her everywhere, wanted to be just like her. But as we got older, the cracks in our relationship started to show. By the time we were teenagers, it became clear that we were living in 2 different worlds. Lily was confident, outgoing, and always surrounded by friends, while I was quieter, more reserved. I never felt like I fit in with her crowd. And over time, the gap between us widened. She started treating me more like an annoyance than a sister. And I began to resent the way she seemed to bask in the attention our parents gave her. Despite all that, I still loved her, still hoped that one day we'd find a way back to each other. So when she got engaged and asked me to be her maid of honor, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe this was our chance to reconnect, to rebuild the bond we had when we were younger. I said yes without hesitation, determined to be the best maid of honor I could be, even if I had my doubts about how much she really wanted me there. Planning the wedding was intense, to say the least. Lily, true to form, was a perfectionist about every detail, from the venue to the flowers to the seating arrangements. Nothing was left to chance. She had always been controlling, but this was next level. Every conversation we had about the wedding seemed to revolve around her vision, her desires, her perfect day. I tried to be supportive, but there were moments when it felt like she didn't even see me. I was just another accessory to her grand event. Still, I pushed my feelings aside. After all, this was her wedding, and I didn't want to ruin it by making it about me. So I helped with the bridal shower, the bachelorette party, and all the other duties that came with being the maid of honor. I smiled through the endless appointments and fittings, even when she snapped at me for not picking the right shade of lipstick or for suggesting a less expensive catering option. I told myself it was worth it, that this was just stress, that once the big day came, everything would be fine. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I could feel the distance between us growing with each passing day, like I was watching my sister from behind a glass wall. She was so wrapped up in her own world, in her vision of the perfect wedding, that she barely seemed to notice me at all. Then came the wedding day. I woke up that morning with a mix of excitement and dread. I wanted to believe that everything would go smoothly, that all the tension and stress leading up to the day would melt away once we were standing together, watching her walk down the aisle. I had spent months helping her plan this, pouring all my energy into making sure it would be the day she had always dreamed of. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Of course, it was in a grand cathedral, with towering stained glass windows and rows of perfectly arranged white roses lining the pews. Lily looked stunning, like a vision in her flowing white gown, and as she walked down the aisle with our father, I felt a surge of pride. Despite everything, she was my sister, and in that moment, I was happy for her. But the happiness didn't last long. After the ceremony, we moved to the reception hall, where the real nightmare began. I had known the seating arrangements would be tricky. Lily had spent weeks agonizing over who would sit where, but I hadn't expected what came next. As I made my way to the head table, where I assumed I would be sitting alongside the bride and groom, I noticed something strange. My name wasn't on the seating chart near the front of the room. I scanned the table, looking for my place card, but it wasn't there. Confused, I walked around, trying to figure out where I was supposed to sit. That's when I saw it. My name, in delicate calligraphy, placed at the far end of the room, at the kids' table. I stared at the card, disbelief washing over me. There had to be some kind of mistake. This couldn't be right. I was the maid of honor, Lily's own sister, and she had placed me at the kids' table? My heart pounded in my chest as I looked around the room, half expecting someone to come up and tell me it was a joke, that I wasn't really supposed to sit there. But no one did. Instead, I stood there, frozen, while the kids, ranging from toddlers to preteens, laughed and played around the table, completely unaware of the humiliation I was feeling. I could feel the heat rising in my face, the sting of embarrassment as guests began to take their seats. Everyone would see. Everyone would know that Lily had relegated me to the farthest corner of the room. Like I didn't belong. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to walk out, to leave the reception and never look back. But another part of me was too shocked, too hurt, to move. How could she do this to me? After everything I had done to help her, after all the hours I had spent making sure her day was perfect, this was how she repaid me? By making me sit with a bunch of children, like I wasn't even worthy of sitting with the adults? I tried to hold it together, to smile through the pain as I took my seat at the kids' table, surrounded by sticky fingers and noisy chatter. But inside, I was crumbling. It felt like every insecurity I had ever had about my relationship with Lily was being confirmed in that moment. I wasn't important to her. I wasn't her equal. I was just an afterthought, someone she could push aside when it suited her. As the night went on, I sat there, watching from the sidelines as the rest of the guests laughed and celebrated. The head table, where I should have been sitting, felt miles away. Lily and her new husband looked radiant, surrounded by their friends and family, while I sat in the shadows, feeling more alone than I ever had before. I couldn't help but think back to all the times I had felt like this growing up, like I was always in Lily's shadow, never quite measuring up. She had always been the center of attention, the one everyone admired, while I faded into the background. And now, on her wedding day, she had made it clear that nothing had changed. I was still the little sister, the one who didn't matter as much. By the end of the night, I was emotionally drained. I watched as Lily and her husband shared their first dance, as the guests clinked their glasses in celebration, as the night stretched on and I remained an outsider in my own sister's wedding. No one came to check on me. No one asked why the maid of honor was sitting at the kids' table. It was as if I didn't exist. When the night finally ended, I left without saying goodbye. I couldn't bear to face Lily, to confront her about what she had done. I didn't want to make a scene or cause a rift in the family. But the damage had already been done. Our relationship, already fragile, had been shattered that night. In the weeks that followed, I tried to make sense of it all. I replayed the day over and over in my mind, wondering what I had done to deserve such treatment. Had I said something wrong? Had I not done enough to help her? Or was this just another way for Lily to remind me that I would never be on her level, that I would always be the little sister, never quite good enough? I wanted to talk to her about it, to ask her why she had done it. But every time I thought about reaching out, I stopped myself. I didn't know if I could handle her response. What if she didn't care? What if she brushed it off, said it was no big deal, that I was overreacting? The thought of hearing that from her was too painful, so I kept my distance. Eventually, the anger and hurt began to fade, replaced by a deep sense of resignation. I realized that Lily and I would never have the relationship I had once hoped for. We were too different, too far apart in how we saw the world and each other. She had always been the star, and I had always been in the background. That wasn't going to change, no matter how much I wanted it to. Looking back now, I realized that day wasn't just about a wedding or a seating arrangement. It was a culmination of years of unresolved issues between us, of a dynamic that had been brewing beneath the surface for as long as I could remember. In many ways, the wedding was just the final straw, the moment when everything I had been feeling finally became too much to ignore. I kept my distance from Lily for a long time after that. The hurt ran too deep, and I wasn't sure I could ever forgive her. I tried to move on with my life, to focus on my own path, but the memory of that day lingered. Every time I thought about it, a part of me wondered if I had somehow misunderstood the whole situation. Maybe it hadn't been intentional. Maybe she hadn't meant to hurt me. Maybe I was just overthinking things, as I often did. But then, about 6 months after the wedding, something unexpected happened. Lily reached out to me. She asked if we could meet for coffee. And despite my reservations, I agreed. Part of me didn't want to see her, didn't want to rehash everything that had happened. But another part of me, the part that still longed for the closeness we had once shared, needed to hear what she had to say. When we met, she looked different, not physically, but there was something in her demeanor that had changed. She seemed more vulnerable, less sure of herself. We sat down, and before I could say anything, she apologized, not just for the wedding, but for everything, our entire relationship, the way she had treated me over the years. She admitted that she had always felt the need to be in control, to be the best, and that she had taken that out on me, often without realizing it. She told me that on her wedding day, she had been so consumed with making everything perfect that she hadn't thought about how her actions might affect me. She said that she never meant to hurt me, that the seating arrangement had been a last-minute change made by the wedding planner, and that she hadn't realized where I was sitting until it was too late. Whether that was true or not, I wasn't sure, but hearing her acknowledge my pain meant something. We talked for a long time that day, about our childhood, about the way we had drifted apart, about the unspoken tensions that had always existed between us. For the first time, I felt like we were truly seeing each other, not as rivals or as siblings competing for attention, but as two people who had both been hurt in different ways. It wasn't a perfect resolution. The wounds from the wedding, and from years of feeling overlooked, didn't just disappear overnight, but it was a start. Over time, we began to rebuild our relationship, slowly and cautiously. I no longer expected her to be the perfect sister, and she no longer expected me to stay in her shadow. We found a way to meet in the middle, to accept each other for who we were, flaws and all. Looking back now, I realized that the wedding, as painful as it was, forced us to confront the issues we had been avoiding for years. It wasn't just about sitting at the kids' table. It was about everything that had come before. All the moments when I had felt less than, unseen, unimportant. In the end, it wasn't the seating arrangement that mattered. It was the fact that we finally faced the truth about our relationship. And from that truth, we found a way to move forward. Now, years later, our relationship isn't perfect, but it's better. We still have our differences, but we've learned how to respect them. We've learned how to talk to each other, how to be honest about our feelings, and most importantly, how to support each other without letting old resentments get in the way. I don't know if I'll ever forget the humiliation of that day, or the years of feeling like I was living in Lily's shadow. But I've learned that relationships, especially with family, are complicated. They're messy, full of ups and downs, and sometimes they take you to places you never expected to go. But if you're willing to face the hard truths, if you're willing to let go of the past and open yourself up to the possibility of change, there's always a chance to find something better on the other side. For me and Lily, that chance came when I least expected it. And while the journey to get here wasn't easy, I'm grateful that we found a way to rebuild what we had lost. Because in the end, no matter how painful the past may be, family is still family. And that's something worth fighting for.